I'm writing this from a hospital bed. My left arm ends just below the elbow now. There's a stump there, wrapped in gauze and surgical tape, and every time I look at it, I feel two things simultaneously: relief and understanding. My name is Kevin, and I need to tell you about my grandfather Harold. Growing up, nobody in my family talked about Harold. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. He was the silence at Thanksgiving dinner. The empty chair. The name that made my mother's jaw tighten and my father leave the room. What I knew, what everyone knew, was that Harold had been institutionalized when my father was 11 years old. Committed for life. Not to a nursing home. Not to some quiet retirement facility with gardens and bingo nights. No. Harold was locked in a state psychiatric facility with concrete walls and steel doors and nurses who carried sedatives the way soldiers carry sidearms. He'd attacked people. That was the story. Over and over, for years, he'd attacked people. Strangers. Neighbors. His own family. My grandmother had a scar on her forearm, 4 parallel lines, like something had raked across her skin. She said it was from a gardening accident. Nobody believed her. Nobody asked twice. But the worst of it, the thing that put Harold away for good, was the car. On a Tuesday afternoon in 1987, Harold got behind the wheel of his Buick LeSabre, drove to the farmer's market on Whitfield Avenue, and plowed through the crowd at 40 miles per hour. 13 people. 13 human beings with families and futures and Friday night plans. 4 of them died. The rest were broken in ways that don't fully heal. Harold never explained why. Not to the police. Not to the lawyers. Not to the psychiatrists who spent decades trying to crack him open. He just sat in his cell, year after year, and said nothing. Sometimes he rocked back and forth. Sometimes he stared at his left wrist and wept. I always thought he was a monster. A broken, evil man who had passed some dark stain into our bloodline. I carried that shame like a stone in my chest for 23 years. Then Harold died. He was 89. He died in his sleep in that facility, alone, on a Thursday in October. The leaves outside were turning red and gold, and the world barely noticed. There was no funeral procession. No crowd of mourners. Just my parents, my aunt, a bored-looking chaplain, and me. The casket was closed. I remember staring at it, this plain wooden box, and trying to feel something. Grief, maybe. Or anger. But all I felt was a vague, hollow curiosity. Who were you, really? What made you do those things? After the burial, we went back to my parents' house. My aunt had a cardboard box, Harold's personal effects from the facility. There wasn't much. A Bible with half the pages torn out. Reading glasses with one cracked lens. 3 composition notebooks filled with the same sentence written over and over, "It was not me." Hundreds of times. Thousands, maybe. Every page. Every line. It was not me. It was not me. It was not me. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a piece of yellowed cloth, was a watch. It was a cheap thing. Silver-toned, not actual silver. An automatic mechanical watch, the kind that wins itself from the movement of your wrist. The crystal was scratched but not cracked. The face was simple, black background, white numerals, no brand name. No date window. Just the hours and the hands. But when I turned it over, I felt something shift in my chest. On the back of the watch, etched into the metal with what looked like surgical precision, was a symbol. 2 triangles, intersecting, one pointing up, one pointing down, with a perfect square overlaid at the center. And surrounding it all, a circle. The lines were thin and deliberate. This wasn't scratched in by hand. This was carved. Designed. Intended. "What is this?" I asked my aunt. She glanced at it and looked away quickly. He was wearing it when they arrested him. They let him keep it. He never took it off. Not once in 40 years. Why? She shrugged. But there was something in her eyes. Something that looked a lot like fear. My father didn't want me to take it. He stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Leave it, Kevin. Throw it away. I don't want that thing in this house." But I took it anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would help me understand. Maybe I thought owning a piece of Harold would make him less of a ghost and more of a man. Maybe I was just 23 and stupid. I slipped it onto my left wrist in the car on the way home. The band was old leather, cracked and stiff, and it fit almost perfectly. The watch face caught the light from the dashboard, and for just a second, I could have sworn the second hand twitched even though the watch hadn't been wound in God knows how long. I told myself I imagined it. I got back to my apartment around 11 that night. My roommate Jake was already asleep. I brushed my teeth, changed into sweatpants, and climbed into bed. I remember looking at the watch one more time before I turned off the lamp. The second hand was moving. Smoothly, steadily, as if it had always been moving. As if it had never stopped. Automatic watches wind themselves through motion, I reminded myself. I'd been wearing it for 2 hours. Of course it was running. I turned off the light. I slept. I woke up at 6:47 a.m. I know because I looked at the watch. But the numbers on the face weren't right. I blinked. Rubbed my eyes. Held my wrist up to the thin morning light bleeding through my blinds. The numbers, the 12 numerals that should have been arranged in a perfect circle around the dial, had moved. They weren't showing the time anymore. They had rearranged themselves into letters. For words, spelled out in those tiny white characters, pressed tight against the black face of the watch, "Hold your breath." I stared at it. My brain refused to process it. Watches don't do that. Numbers don't rearrange into words. This isn't possible. I'm still dreaming. I'm still asleep and the second hand was still moving. Tick. 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 Counting out real seconds in real time. Hold your breath. I almost laughed. It was absurd. A dead man's watch was giving me instructions. What was I supposed to do? Just stop breathing because a piece of cheap jewelry told me to? I didn't hold my breath. The pain hit like a wasp sting, sharp, hot, and precise. It came from directly beneath the watch face, right where the metal casing pressed against the thin skin of my inner wrist. I yelped and grabbed at the watch, trying to pull it off. It didn't move. I pulled harder. The leather band was tight, too tight. It had been loose the night before, I was sure of it. Now it pressed against my skin like a blood pressure cuff cranked too far. I dug my fingers under the band and yanked. The pain multiplied. It felt like needles, dozens of them, pushing up through the bottom of the watch case and into my wrist. Not metaphorical needles. Real ones. I could feel them sliding between tendons, pricking against bone. I screamed. I fumbled with the clasp, but my fingers were shaking too hard. The needles went deeper. I held my breath. Instantly, the pain stopped. I sat there, chest frozen, lungs burning, tears streaming down my face. I looked at the watch. The letters were rearranging again. The tiny white numerals crawled across the black face like insects, reassembling into a new message, good. Then the numbers slid back into place. 6:49 a.m. A normal watch face. As if nothing had happened. I let out my breath in a ragged gasp. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, cradling my left wrist in my right hand. The skin beneath the watch was red and inflamed, dotted with tiny points of blood. Pinpricks. Like a sewing machine had been run across my wrist. I tried to take the watch off again. I worked the clasp carefully, pressing the release with my thumbnail. It clicked open. The band loosened. I started to slide it off, and the skin came. With it. Not a lot. Just a thin layer, like peeling a sunburn. But the watch face was stuck to my skin. The metal casing had bonded with my wrist somehow. There was no gap between the steel and my flesh. It was as if the watch had been soldered directly onto me. I pulled harder and the pain came back, not the needle pain from before, but a deep, ripping sensation. Like trying to peel off a bandage that had been glued to an open wound. I stopped. I couldn't do it. I physically could not remove the watch from my body. I sat there, breathing hard, and thought about Harold. 40 years. He wore this watch for 40 years. I should have gone to the emergency room. I know that now. I should have driven straight to the hospital and let them cut it off. But I didn't. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself it was some kind of allergic reaction, the old metal irritating my skin, making it swell around the watch band. It would loosen up. It would be fine. I got dressed. I went to class. I sat down in my 8 a.m. lecture hall, Introduction to Criminal Psychology, which feels like a sick joke now, and I tried to focus on the professor's voice. 40 minutes into the lecture, the watch buzzed against my wrist. Not like a phone notification. Like something alive shifting under the surface. I looked down. The numbers had rearranged again. Trip the next person. I stared at it. The classroom was half full, students slouched in their seats, laptops open, nobody paying attention. Trip the next person. What did that even mean? Trip someone walking past my desk? Trip someone on the stairs? I looked at the watch and shook my head. No. I'm not doing this. Whatever you are, whatever game this is, I'm not playing. The class ended. Students stood up, gathered their bags, filed toward the door. A girl walked past my desk close, her backpack swinging. All I had to do was extend my foot. 6 inches. That's all it would take. I didn't do it. The needles came back. Worse this time. Not just pinpricks but deep, grinding pressure, like the watch was tightening around my wrist, compressing the bones. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood. My vision blurred. I gripped the edge of my desk with my right hand and squeezed until my knuckles turned white. The pain lasted 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. It felt like an hour. When it finally faded, I was soaked in sweat and my left hand was trembling so badly I couldn't grip a pen. The watch face rearranged itself. Next time, obey. Then back to normal. 8:54 a.m. I went to the bathroom and vomited. The rest of the morning was quiet. No messages. No pain. Just a watch on my wrist, ticking away, keeping perfect time. I almost convinced myself I'd had a panic attack. Some kind of stress response, grief over Harold, sleep deprivation, the power of suggestion. I went to my afternoon class. Sat down. Opened my notebook. At 1:15 p.m., the watch buzzed. Steal her wallet. I looked up. The girl next to me, I didn't know her name, brunette, green jacket, had set her bag on the floor between our chairs. The zipper was half open. I could see the corner of a wallet inside. Brown leather, stuffed with cards and cash. My hand moved before I made a decision. My fingers twitched toward her bag, and for one horrible, sickening moment, I wanted to do it. Not because I wanted her money. Not because I'm a thief. Because the alternative was pain. Because my body had already learned, in the space of a single morning, to fear what happened when I disobeyed. I reached into the bag. My fingers brushed the wallet. I started to close my hand around it. She looked at me. "What are you doing?" I jerked my hand back. Sorry, I thought I dropped my pen. I thought it rolled into your bag." She stared at me. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. She pulled her bag to the other side of her chair, away from me, and I sat there with my face burning and my heart slamming against my ribs. I'd failed. The pain hit immediately. And this time, it was different. The needles were there, they were always there now, a constant background hum of sharpness pressed against my skin, but this was something else. This was the watch itself, moving. I felt the metal casing shift against my wrist, and when I looked down, I watched the edges of the watch sink into my skin. Not press against it. Sink into it. The border between metal and flesh blurred, the steel taking on the pinkish hue of skin, my skin taking on the gray sheen of metal. It was spreading. I pushed back from my desk and stood up. The professor stopped mid-sentence. Everyone looked at me. I grabbed my bag and walked out without a word. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and pulled up my sleeve. The watch was embedded in my wrist now. The leather band had disappeared entirely, consumed or absorbed, I couldn't tell. The metal casing sat flush with my skin, like a porthole in the hull of a ship. Around it, a network of fine silver lines spread outward, following the veins beneath my skin. They extended maybe an inch past the edge of the watch in every direction, these delicate metallic filaments threading through my flesh like roots. I scratched at one of the lines with my fingernail. It didn't flake off. It didn't smudge. It was under the skin. Part of me. I'm not ashamed to say I cried. Standing in that hallway, 23 years old, crying like a child because a dead man's watch was eating me alive. The watch buzzed. Stab her. I looked through the small window in the classroom door. The girl in the green jacket. The one whose wallet I tried to steal. She was still sitting in her seat, taking notes, completely unaware. Stab her. No, I whispered. No, I won't. The watch didn't punish me. Not immediately. It just sat there, those two words burning against my wrist, patient and absolute. Stab her. Like it could wait forever. Like it knew I would break. I went back into the classroom. I don't know why. I should have run. I should have gone to the hospital, the police, a church, anywhere. But the watch had its hooks in me, literally, physically, hooks of metal threaded through my skin, and some part of me knew, with a certainty that went beyond rational thought, that distance wouldn't matter. The watch would still be there. The commands would still come. I sat down. The girl glanced at me nervously. I smiled at her and it felt like someone else was wearing my face. I picked up my pencil. A standard number 2, freshly sharpened. The watch buzzed. One word this time, now. My arm moved. Fast. Faster than I thought possible. I drove the pencil down like an ice pick, directly through the back of her hand where it rested on the desk. The point punched through skin and muscle and tendon and pinned her hand to the wooden surface of the desk. She screamed. God, she screamed. This high, ragged sound that didn't seem like it could come from a human throat. Blood welled up around the pencil, dark and fast. She tried to pull her hand free and the pencil held, graphite tip buried in the wood, and she screamed again, louder. I was on my feet. I was running. I don't remember deciding to run. I was just moving, out of the classroom, down the hall, through the double doors, across the quad, my lungs burning and my vision tunneling and the watch ticking against my wrist, steady and calm. I looked down while I ran. The watch face had rearranged, good boy. I made it back to my apartment. I locked the door. I stood in the kitchen with my back against the refrigerator and I shook. Full-body tremors, the kind that make your teeth chatter and your knees buckle. I had stabbed someone. I had driven a pencil through a girl's hand. A girl I didn't know. A girl who had done nothing wrong. And the worst part, the part that makes me sick even now, writing this with one hand from a hospital bed, is that the moment the pencil went in, the moment her skin parted and the graphite sank through, the pain in my wrist vanished completely. Total relief. Like plunging a burned hand into cold water. Like the first breath after being held underwater. The watch had rewarded me. I stood in that kitchen for an hour. Maybe 2. Jake wouldn't be home until evening. I had time. Time to think. Time to plan. I tried everything. I boiled water and held the watch over the steam, hoping the heat would loosen whatever bond held it to my skin. Nothing. I got a butter knife and tried to pry up the edges of the casing. The knife slipped and cut my skin, but the watch didn't budge. I tried soap, oil, ice. I even tried a pair of wire cutters from the junk drawer, positioning the jaws around what was left of the band, but there was no band anymore. Just metal and skin and those silver threads reaching deeper, spreading further. When I looked closely, really closely, under the bright fluorescent light above the sink, I could see the threads moving. Slowly. Imperceptibly. Like watching the minute hand of a clock. They were growing. Extending. Reaching toward my elbow in a web of fine metallic lines that pulsed faintly, catching the light with each heartbeat. I thought about Harold. I thought about him sitting in that facility for 40 years, rocking back and forth, staring at his wrist. I thought about "It was not me" written 10,000 times in those notebooks. I thought about the farmer's market. 13 people. The watch had told him to do it. And Harold had done it because the alternative was worse. At 6:30 p.m., the watch buzzed. Cut off a finger. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Cut off a finger. My finger. It wanted me to mutilate myself. No, I said. Out loud, to an empty apartment. Absolutely not. I braced myself for the pain. But what came was something I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't needles. It wasn't pressure. It was heat. The watch began to warm against my skin. Gradually at first, like holding a mug of coffee. Then hotter. Then much hotter. Within 30 seconds, the metal was searing branding iron hot and I could smell my own skin burning, I screamed and ran to the sink and shoved my arm under cold water, but the heat was coming from inside, from the watch itself, and the water did nothing. I dropped to my knees on the kitchen floor. The agony was extraordinary. I could feel the metal threads conducting the heat deeper into my arm, carrying it along my veins like lava flowing through channels. My fingers curled into a fist involuntarily, the tendons contracting, and I watched in horror as the silver threads advanced another inch up my forearm, spreading in a fractal pattern that looked almost beautiful if you didn't know it was your body being colonized. The pain lasted 5 minutes. When it stopped, I was lying on the floor in a puddle of cold water and sweat, and the skin around the watch was blistered and raw. The silver threads now reached halfway to my elbow. They had thickened. Some of them were no longer lines but ribbons, flat bands of metal woven between muscles, visible through the skin like rebar in concrete. The watch face read, "Last warning." I crawled to the bathroom. I sat on the tile floor with my back against the tub and I looked at my arm and I thought, this is how it happens. This is how Harold became a monster. Not all at once. Not because he chose to be evil. But inch by inch, command by command, punishment by punishment, until the thing on his wrist had taken so much of him that there was nothing left to resist with. The watch hadn't just controlled Harold. It had consumed him. And it was consuming me. I thought about the 13 people at the farmer's market. I thought about the commands that must have come before that day. Small ones at first, maybe. Trip someone. Steal something. Hurt someone. And then bigger. And bigger. Until one day the watch said drive into the crowd and Harold's body obeyed because it had learned, over years of agony and invasion, that obedience was the only way to make the pain stop. He hadn't been a monster. He'd been a prisoner. And now I was too. Jake came. Home at 7:15. I heard his key in the lock. The front door opened and closed. His footsteps in the hallway. The thump of his backpack hitting the couch. Kev? You home? I was still on the kitchen floor. I'd pulled my sleeve down to cover the watch and the silver threads, but my face was a wreck, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears, lips cracked from biting back screams. In here, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway. 6'2", broad shoulders, a genuinely good person in a world that makes it hard to be one. He took one look at me and his face shifted from casual to concerned in an instant. Dude, what happened? Are you okay? I opened my mouth to tell him. To explain everything, the watch, the commands, the pain, the girl with the pencil through her hand. I was going to tell him and he was going to help me and we were going to figure this out together. The watch buzzed. I froze. I looked down at my wrist, hidden beneath my sleeve. I didn't need to push the fabric back to know what it said. I could feel the letters rearranging like insects crawling across my skin. Throw boiling water at him. On the stove behind me, the pot of water I'd used earlier to try to steam the watch loose was still sitting on the burner. Still hot. Maybe not boiling anymore, but close. Steam drifted lazily from the surface. Kevin? Jake took a step closer. Talk to me, man. You're scaring me. My hand was already moving. That was the worst part, the automation of it, the way my body had begun to respond to the watch's commands with less and less resistance. My right hand closed around the handle of the pot. It was warm. Not hot enough to burn my palm, but the water inside was still near boiling. I could feel the heat radiating through the metal. I tried to stop. I swear to God, I tried. I locked my elbow. I tightened my grip on the handle and willed my arm to stay still. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. He's your friend. He's your best friend. He's done nothing wrong. The watch sent a pulse of pain through my left arm, a warning shot, a preview of what was coming if I disobeyed. The silver threads contracted, squeezing my muscles, and my left hand spasmed, fingers splaying wide. Kevin, seriously, what? I threw the water. The pot tilted and the water came out in a sheet, a shimmering curtain of near-boiling liquid that caught the kitchen light for one perfect, terrible instant before it hit Jake full in the chest and face. The sound he made. I will hear that sound for the rest of my life. It was beyond screaming. It was a noise that came from somewhere deeper than the throat, deeper than the lungs, a sound pulled from the very center of a body that is being destroyed and knows it. He stumbled backward, hands clawing at his face, at the skin that was already blistering and peeling, and he hit the doorframe and slid down to the floor. His shirt was steaming. The skin on his neck was turning white, not red, white, the kind of burn where the nerve endings die so fast you stop feeling it, where the damage goes past pain and into something structural and permanent. I dropped the pot. It clanged against the floor and rolled under the table. Jake was writhing, making sounds that weren't words anymore, just animal noises of pure suffering. I stood over him and I felt the watch relax against my wrist. Satisfied. Then the letters moved again. Kill him. Jake was on the floor. His eyes were squeezed shut. The skin on the left side of his face was coming off in sheets, revealing the raw, glistening tissue underneath. He was in so much pain he couldn't even cry out anymore. Just these quiet, hitching breaths. His hands were burned too angry red, covered in blisters that were already swelling with fluid. Kill him. The knife block was on the counter. 3 feet away. A chef's knife, a bread knife, a paring knife, a set of steak knives. All within easy reach. One step and I could have any of them in my hand. Kill him. I looked at Jake. I looked at the knife block. I looked at the watch on my wrist, those 2 words glowing with cold authority. And something inside me, something that the watch hadn't reached yet, something buried deep in the center of my chest where the metal threads couldn't go, that something said no. Not no like before. Not the trembling, desperate no of someone trying to resist and failing. This was a different no. This was the no of someone who has seen the edge of the cliff and decided to jump, but in the other direction. Away from the abyss. Back towards something human. I was not going to kill Jake. I was not going to kill anyone. I was not going to become Harold. The pain started immediately. The worst yet. The watch blazed white-hot against my wrist, and the silver threads contracted with a force that I was sure would snap my bones. My forearm felt like it was being fed through a machine, compressed, crushed, reshaped. The threads were moving fast now, visibly advancing, climbing toward my elbow with purpose and hunger. They wanted more of me. The watch wanted all of me. I screamed. I fell to my knees next to Jake, both of us on the kitchen floor, both of us ruined in different ways. The pain was so intense that my vision went white, then black, then white again. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. In my eyes. In the marrow of my bones. And in that white-hot clarity, I understood something. The watch would never stop. It would keep giving commands, keep punishing disobedience, keep spreading through my body until I was nothing but a puppet, meat and metal, following orders, incapable of refusal. Harold had lived that way for 40 years. 40 years of trying to resist, failing, obeying, hating himself, writing "it was not me" in notebook after notebook because it was the only truth he had left. I would not live that way for 40 minutes. I reached for the knife block. But not for Jake. I pulled out the bread knife. The one with the serrated edge. 8 inches of carbon steel with teeth designed to cut through crust and bone and everything in between. The watch seemed to understand what I was doing. The letters on the face rearranged frantically. Stop. Don't. Obey. Kill him. Obey. The pain doubled. Tripled. The threads raced up my arm, past my elbow now, silver tendrils wrapping around my bicep, reaching for my shoulder. I could feel them threading between my muscles, winding around my humerus, burrowing deeper with every passing second. I didn't have much time. I put my left arm on the kitchen counter. I positioned the blade of the bread knife against the inside of my forearm, about 3 inches below my elbow, above the highest silver thread. Above the infection. Above everything the watch had claimed. I want to tell you that I didn't hesitate. That I was brave. That I gritted my teeth and did what needed to be done with calm determination. That would be a lie. I sobbed. I begged. I said please, out loud, to no one. Please let there be another way. Please don't make me do this. I pressed the blade against my skin and the watch blazed and the pain screamed and the threads climbed and I cut. The serrated edge bit into skin. Then fat. Then muscle. I sawed back and forth. You have to saw with a bread knife, you can't just press and cut, you have to move the blade, back and forth, and the blood came fast and heavy and hot, sheeting over the countertop, dripping onto the floor. The pain of the cutting was different from the pain of the watch. The watch pain was alien, invasive, wrong. The cutting pain was clean. Human. Mine. I won't describe every second of it. Some things are better left behind a closed door in the mind. But I will tell you this, the watch fought. As the blade reached bone, the silver threads on my lower arm went rigid, tightening like guitar strings, pulling the severed muscles taut, trying to hold themselves together. The watch face blazed with words so fast I couldn't read them, commands, threats, promises, an entire language of desperation scrolling across the tiny black dial. And then the blade went through. My left arm, the lower half, from mid-forearm down, fell to the counter with a heavy, wet thud. The watch was still attached to it. Still ticking. The silver threads still glinted beneath the skin, but they had gone still. Dead. Severed from their host. I staggered backward, holding my stump against my chest. Blood was everywhere, on the counter, on the floor, on my clothes, pooling around Jake who was still lying in the doorway, barely conscious. I grabbed a dish towel and wrapped it around the stump as tight as I could, cinching it with my teeth and my remaining hand. I called 911. I don't remember what I said. I think I told them someone was hurt and then I sat down on the kitchen floor and I stared at the severed arm on the counter. The watch was still ticking. Through the blood and the exposed muscle and the splintered bone, I could see the face. The numbers had settled into a final configuration. Not a time. Not a command. Just 4 letters, free. I passed out before the paramedics arrived. I woke up in the hospital. Fluorescent lights. Beeping machines. A tube in my right arm. A stump where my left forearm used to be. Jake is alive. He's in the burn unit, 2 floors up. 3rd-degree burns across 30% of his body. They've done 3 skin grafts so far. He'll need more. His face will never look the same. I did that to him. The watch gave the order, but my hand held the pot. I did that. The girl from my class, her name is Sarah, I found out later, needed surgery on her hand. Nerve damage. She might not regain full use of her fingers. I did that too. The police came to my room. Of course they did. I told them everything. The watch, the commands, the pain, all of it. They looked at me the way you'd expect, with that careful, practiced blankness that cops use when they're deciding whether someone is dangerous or just broken. They sent a psychiatrist. She asked me if I heard voices. I said no. She asked if I believed inanimate objects could communicate with me. I said I didn't believe it. I experienced it. There's a difference. They went to my apartment to collect evidence. The severed arm was still on the counter. The watch was still attached. Still ticking. But when the forensic team tried to remove the watch from the arm, it came off easily. Just a watch. No needles. No fused metal. No silver threads. Just a cheap automatic wristwatch with a weird symbol on the back. They think I'm insane. Of course they do. There's no evidence of anything I've described. The threads, the embedded metal, the rearranging numbers, none of it left a trace. The watch is sitting in an evidence bag somewhere, looking perfectly ordinary, ticking away, waiting. But I know the truth. And I know this, somewhere in that evidence room, or in a box in some detective's desk, or wherever they keep the belongings of people they think are crazy, that watch is waiting. And one day, someone will pick it up. Someone will turn it over and see the sigil, 2 intersecting triangles, a square, a circle, and they'll feel curious. They'll feel drawn to it. They'll slip it onto their wrist, just for a moment, just to see. And the numbers will start to move. I understand my grandfather now. I understand the notebooks. It was not me. He was right. It wasn't him. It was the watch. And he couldn't do what I did. He couldn't cut it off. Maybe he was too afraid. Maybe after 40 years, the threads had gone too deep past his arm, into his chest, wrapped around his spine and his heart and his brain. Maybe by the time he realized what was happening, there was nothing left to cut away. I was lucky. I caught it early. 3 days with the watch, and it cost me half my arm. Harold wore it for decades. What did it cost him? Everything. His family. His freedom. His humanity. His name became a curse in our household, spoken in whispers if spoken at all. He died alone in a concrete room, and nobody mourned him. I mourn him now. I don't know what the watch is. I don't know who made it or why. I don't know if the sigil on the back is a ward, a seal, a signature, or a trap. I've searched online demonology, cursed objects, haunted artifacts, and I've found nothing that matches exactly. 2 intersecting triangles with a square inside a circle. It doesn't appear in any grimoire or folklore database I can find. Maybe it's one of a kind. Maybe there are others. That thought keeps me up at night. The doctors say my stump is healing well. Clean cut, they say, impressive, given the circumstances. The bone was severed neatly. The bread knife did good work. They're fitting me for a prosthetic next month. Jake won't see me. I don't blame him. His mother came to my room once, stood in the doorway, and looked at me with an expression that I recognized immediately. It was the same look my aunt had given the watch. Pure, distilled fear. Not fear of what I am, but fear of what I represent. The proof that something terrible can happen to anyone, at any time, for no reason at all. She didn't say anything. She turned around and left. I'm writing this because I need someone to know. Not the police, they've already decided I'm delusional. Not my family, my father knew, I think. He told me to leave the watch alone. He told me to throw it away. He knew what it was. Maybe he'd seen what it did to Harold. Maybe Harold had tried to warn him. I'm writing this because the watch is still out there, in an evidence bag, ticking. And someone, someday, is going to put it on. If you ever come across a silver watch, cheap, automatic, no brand name, turn it over. If you see a sigil on the back, 2 triangles intersecting, a square in the center, a circle surrounding it all, do not put it on. Do not touch it. Do not keep it. Destroy it if you can. Run if you can't. Because once it's on your wrist, it will never stop. The commands will come. Small at first. Then bigger. Then unthinkable. And the threads, those fine, silver threads, they'll start to grow. They'll wind through your muscles. Wrap around your bones. Thread between your tendons until you can't tell where the metal ends and you begin. Until it's not you anymore. Until it was never you. My name is Kevin. I'm 23 years old. I'm writing this from a hospital bed with one hand. I finally understand my grandfather. And I wish to God I didn't.